How childhood affects your adult behavior. We carry the echoes of our childhood with us long after the years of innocence fade. The way we were loved, the way we were cared for, or sometimes the way we were neglected, these early experiences leave their marks. They shape us in ways we do not always see, guiding how we respond to the world, how we connect with others, how we love, how we fear. As adults, we may wonder why we react the way we do, why we feel a deep, silent longing for love, or why intimacy feels so difficult. The answers are often hidden in our past. This journey looks back at those early years, to understand how childhood shapes adult behavior, and how the wounds of the past can still influence the way we move through life today. There are moments when we react to something in our adult lives, and we wonder, why am I acting this way? The response seems disproportionate, the emotion feels too intense, and yet, it is as if something deep inside us has been triggered, something we didn't even know was still there. This is the quiet echo of our past, reaching into our present, shaping the way we respond, the way we interact, the way we love. Childhood is a time of deep imprinting, of emotional patterns being formed that often go unnoticed. From the first moments of life, we are learning how to relate to the world around us, how to trust, how to seek connection, how to protect ourselves when those connections are broken. What we experience in those formative years, how we are loved, how we are seen, how we are held or abandoned, shapes the very foundation of who we become as adults. For many, these childhood experiences are not immediately accessible. They are stored in the deeper parts of the mind, quiet and still, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. It is in our relationships, in our emotional responses, in our inner dialogues, that these echoes become apparent. We don't always recognize that the person who made us feel small as a child is now reflected in the authority figures or partners we gravitate toward. We don't always realize that the emotional neglect we faced as a child plays out in our adult relationships, where we either overgive in the hopes of being loved or shut down emotionally in fear of being hurt again. But these are not isolated incidents. These are patterns that are learned early, often unknowingly, and carried with us as we grow. They are the ways we have learned to cope, to survive, to protect ourselves emotionally. And often, we carry them without questioning their validity in our adult lives. Attachment theory tells us that the way we connect with our caregivers during childhood forms the basis for how we will relate to others later in life. If we were raised in an environment where love was consistent and nurturing, we learn that it is safe to be close to others, that we are worthy of affection, and that we can trust others to meet our emotional needs. But if we were raised in an environment where love was inconsistent, conditional, or absent, we learn to doubt love itself. We learn to crave affection while also fearing it. We learn to attach, but also to protect ourselves from attachment. The emotional tools we learned in childhood shape how we seek intimacy, how we react to conflict, how we deal with vulnerability. As adults, we find ourselves repeating the same emotional dynamics, the same relational patterns, the same fears. We may wonder why we are always drawn to the same type of partner, or why we seem to push people away when they get too close. These patterns, rooted in childhood attachment, become the template for all future relationships. They are the lens through which we view love, intimacy, and connection. The behavior we repeat, the way we respond to the people we are closest to, often feels like an automatic reaction, a reflex we cannot control. We may not even realize we are doing it until we step back and see the familiar emotional scripts playing out in front of us. It is only when we begin to question these patterns, when we begin to look at the way our past influences our present, that we start to understand why we act the way we do. But understanding this connection between childhood and adult behavior is not about blaming the past. It is about recognizing the patterns so that we can start to change them. It is about acknowledging that the emotional scars of childhood do not define us, but the way we respond to them does. It is through this recognition that we begin to see how our past shapes us and how we have the power to rewrite those patterns moving forward. In this chapter, we begin to peel back the layers of our emotional responses. We start to see the connections between how we were loved as children and how we love as adults. We recognize that the echoes of the past are not just memories, but emotional truths that continue to shape our lives, and that only by understanding these truths can we begin to heal and transform the way we connect with others. The past may have shaped us, but it does not have to define us. The roots of our behavior lie deep within the soil of our childhood experiences. As children, we are emotional sponges, absorbing everything we witness, feeling everything we experience, and learning how to navigate the world based on how we are treated by those who are supposed to care for us. Our attachment to our caregivers, the way they respond to our needs, shapes the emotional foundation upon which all future relationships are built. These early relationships, whether nurturing or neglectful, lay the groundwork for how we will connect with others in the years to come. If our caregivers were consistent and emotionally available, we learn that it is safe to trust others. We learn that we can rely on them when we need comfort, affection, or support. These experiences build a sense of emotional security, giving us the confidence to form healthy bonds later in life. When our needs were met in a loving, predictable way, we grew up believing that love is stable, that trust is earned and given freely, and that intimacy does not come with fear or anxiety. However, if our caregivers were inconsistent or unavailable, if we were met with neglect, emotional distance, or unpredictability, we learned that love is uncertain. We learned that emotional needs are often unmet, and that affection can come with strings attached. These early experiences create a blueprint of insecurity in our emotional lives. The child learns to question whether love is reliable, whether they are worthy of it, and whether they can safely connect to others. The result is often an attachment style that reflects the instability and unpredictability they experienced. This blueprint of attachment, formed in childhood, doesn't disappear as we grow older. It stays with us, woven into the way we interact with the world and those around us. When we become adults, these early attachments influence how we form relationships, how we seek love, and how we cope with emotional closeness. They shape not only the way we view others, but the way we view ourselves. People who experienced secure attachment in childhood typically find it easier to form healthy, balanced relationships. They trust others, feel comfortable with intimacy, and don't fear rejection. Their self-worth is not dependent on the validation of others, because they learned early on that they are worthy of love. In adulthood, they engage in relationships with a sense of ease, offering and receiving affection without the constant need for reassurance. But for those who experienced anxious attachment, relationships often feel like an emotional roller coaster. As children, they were taught that love is conditional, that it must be earned through attention and approval. As adults, they may find themselves constantly seeking reassurance, constantly worrying that their partner will leave them, even when there is no reason to doubt. The fear of abandonment is often overwhelming, and the need for validation becomes a constant emotional struggle. They may attract relationships where their emotional needs are not fully met, but they continue to seek out these dynamics because they are familiar, even if they are painful. Those who experienced avoidant attachment often struggle with emotional closeness as adults. As children, they learned that emotional expression was not safe or reliable. Perhaps they were ignored when they sought comfort, or their needs were dismissed as unimportant. As a result, they became self-reliant, shutting down their own emotions in order to protect themselves from the pain of rejection. In adulthood, they may avoid vulnerability, resist intimacy, and keep others at a distance, afraid that closeness will lead to emotional suffocation or rejection. They may appear emotionally distant or detached, even though they deeply long for connection. Finally, disorganized attachment, the result of inconsistent or traumatic caregiving, creates emotional chaos. Children with disorganized attachment often experienced caregivers who were both sources of comfort and sources of fear. These children may have been caught in cycles of abuse, neglect, or abandonment, leading them to feel both drawn to love and terrified of it. As adults, they may find themselves in relationships that are emotionally unstable, caught in a push-pull dynamic where they simultaneously crave connection and fear it. Their emotional responses may feel disjointed, and they may struggle to form coherent, stable relationships. The key to understanding how these attachment styles affect adult behavior is recognizing that they are not simply habits, but deep emotional needs and fears. Our attachment style is the lens through which we see love, intimacy, and connection. It shapes the way we give and receive affection, the way we trust, and the way we protect ourselves emotionally. The patterns of behavior we learned in childhood are not something we can easily shake off. They are wired into our emotional systems, becoming automatic responses to emotional stimuli. But while our attachment styles are rooted in the past, they are not set in stone. Understanding how our childhood experiences shaped our adult behaviors is the first step toward healing. The more we recognize the influence of early attachment, the more we can begin to reshape how we approach love and relationships. We may not be able to change our past, but we can change how we interact with our future. We can choose to break the patterns, to rewrite the story of how we connect with others, and to create new, healthier attachment dynamics. Behind the emotional patterns that shape our relationships lies a fascinating truth. Our brains are not simply passive recipients of experience. They are active participants in forming our emotional world. From the moment we are born, our brains are in a constant state of development, shaping and reshaping themselves in response to the environment we grow up in. What we experience in childhood, whether it's the way we are cared for, the emotional availability of our caregivers, or the stability of our home life, forms the very foundation for how our brains will function in adulthood. Attachment theory doesn't just explain the emotional bond we share with our caregivers, it reveals the neurobiological process that underpins these bonds, shaping the way we connect, communicate, and interact with others for the rest of our lives. The brain, in its early years, is incredibly malleable. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and form new connections in response to experiences. As children, we learn to navigate our emotions, our social environments, and our relationships through the experiences we have with those closest to us. If our caregivers respond consistently and warmly to our needs, the brain forms positive, secure attachment pathways. We begin to associate emotional connection with safety and comfort, and our brain's neural circuits reinforce this understanding, making it easier for us to form secure relationships as we grow older. This neurobiological process involves several key brain regions, but perhaps the most important for attachment is the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes emotions. In a safe, nurturing environment, the amygdala learns to respond to emotional stimuli in balanced ways, allowing us to trust others, feel empathy, and engage in intimate connections without fear. But when the emotional environment is inconsistent, when caregivers are emotionally unavailable, neglectful, or abusive, the amygdala becomes hyperreactive. The brain learns to respond to emotional threats with heightened anxiety, leading to patterns of emotional dysregulation and fear. The prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making, emotional regulation, and impulse control, also plays a critical role in how we develop attachment. When we feel safe and supported, The prefrontal cortex helps us manage our emotions effectively, allowing us to think clearly, to trust others, and to engage in healthy relationships. But when the brain is constantly in a state of emotional stress or uncertainty, the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate emotions diminishes. This leads to reactive behaviors, where emotional responses are driven by fear or anxiety rather than thoughtful decision-making. In this context, attachment styles form not just from the love we receive, but from the way our brain learns to cope with the emotional environment we inhabit. Secure attachment styles develop when a child's brain is given consistent, loving, and responsive care, allowing them to develop trust, confidence, and emotional stability. These children grow up with a neural foundation that allows them to form healthy, secure relationships, because their brain's wiring encourages balanced emotional responses to intimacy. But for children who experience emotional neglect or inconsistency, the brain's wiring shifts. Their amygdala becomes hypersensitive to emotional cues, constantly on the lookout for emotional threats. They may develop anxious attachment, where they feel overwhelmed by the need for love and validation, constantly scanning for reassurance, because their brain learned to associate emotional connection with uncertainty. Alternatively, children who experience emotional distance or neglect may develop avoidant attachment, learning to shut down their emotions and protect themselves from further disappointment. Their brain, under these conditions, learns to associate emotional closeness with danger, leading to a deep-seated belief that love is something to be avoided rather than embraced. Their prefrontal cortex, which should help regulate emotions, instead encourages emotional distance, leading them to push others away when intimacy arises. The most complex attachment style is disorganized attachment, which forms when a child's emotional needs are met with unpredictability, confusion, or trauma. The child's brain learns that the person who is supposed to provide love and safety is also the source of fear, leading to confusion about how to react to emotional closeness. The child may feel both drawn to and fearful of their caregiver, leading to a disorganized approach to relationships. As adults, these individuals may experience chaos in their relationships, torn between the desire for intimacy and the fear that love will lead to harm. Understanding the science behind attachment helps us recognize how deeply rooted these patterns are. They are not just behaviors, they are biological responses to our early emotional environments. The patterns we develop in childhood are ingrained in our brain's neural circuits, shaping how we engage with the world and those we love. But understanding this scientific foundation also offers hope. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself, means that change is possible. The attachment patterns we learned as children are not permanent, but can be reshaped through new experiences, new relationships, and new ways of thinking. Healing from these early attachment wounds requires more than just understanding the theory. It requires reworking the brain's neural connections. By consciously seeking out secure, healthy relationships, by practicing emotional regulation, and by embracing self-compassion, we can begin to rewrite the attachment styles that govern our adult lives. The brain is not fixed. It is fluid, able to evolve and adapt, even as we grow older. And in that fluidity lies the possibility of transformation, the possibility of healing. There is a quiet dance we do in our relationships, moving to a rhythm we don't always hear, but one that we know instinctively. The steps are familiar. The turns, the pauses, they all feel like second nature, until one day we pause and wonder why we keep dancing the same way. Why, despite the years of experience, despite the desire to change, do we find ourselves stuck in the same relational patterns? It is as if we are drawn to people and situations that trigger the very emotional responses we long to avoid. These patterns are not accidental. They are the invisible echoes of our childhood, the neural pathways laid down by early attachment experiences. They are the emotional scripts we learned as children, which we unknowingly replay in our adult relationships. The anxious person is drawn to the emotionally unavailable. The avoidant person is drawn to those who demand closeness, and the disorganized person dances between extremes, caught between longing and fear. Even when we consciously desire something different, our attachment patterns seem to lead us right back to where we started, attracting the same emotional dynamics, the same relational struggles. It is in these unseen patterns that the core of our attachment style resides. They are not merely behaviors, they are emotional needs and fears that have been cultivated over years of experience. These patterns are so deeply ingrained that they often feel like part of who we are, part of our emotional identity. But they are not fixed. They are learned. And because they are learned, they can be unlearned. The question, however, is, how do we break free from these patterns that have become so familiar? The first step is recognizing that these emotional patterns are not random, but rooted in attachment. The way we respond to others, our desire for closeness, our fear of abandonment, our need for control, all stem from the attachment experiences of our early years. As children, we learned that love could be a source of comfort or chaos, that it could bring safety or pain. These experiences shaped how we understand love in adulthood, how we seek connection, and how we protect ourselves from emotional harm. When we are drawn to the same type of person, it is because we are unconsciously recreating the emotional dynamics that we have known, the ones we learned to navigate in childhood. This doesn't mean that we are consciously choosing unhealthy relationships. It means that these dynamics feel familiar, comfortable, even if they bring pain. The heart tends to gravitate toward what it knows, and the mind, in its deepest recesses, believes that this is the only way love works. For the anxious attachment style, the need for closeness can feel like a desperate hunger. They are drawn to partners who are distant, unavailable, because in some deep part of themselves, they have learned that love must be earned, that it is something they must chase, even at the risk of emotional exhaustion. They may find themselves constantly seeking reassurance, never feeling fully secure in their relationships, because the pattern of seeking love, of feeling it slip just beyond their reach, has become their emotional norm. For those with an avoidant attachment style, the pattern is one of emotional distance. They are drawn to people who need them, who demand affection, because deep down, they have learned that love is something to resist, something that might threaten their sense of independence. They push away when love gets too close, finding it difficult to trust others with their vulnerability. They create distance, protecting themselves from emotional intimacy because it feels like a trap, even when they long for connection. For those with disorganized attachment, the patterns are more chaotic. They may find themselves caught between emotional extremes, seeking love, then pushing it away, afraid that it will either suffocate them or disappear when they need it most. They are often caught in a push-pull dynamic, yearning for closeness, but terrified of the unpredictability that love brings. Their relationships can feel erratic, emotional, and draining as they alternate between seeking connection and retreating from it. These patterns are not just behaviors, they are emotional blueprints, deeply wired into the brain. They are the responses we learned early on to cope with the emotional environment we grew up in. And even though we may consciously desire something different, we often find ourselves in relationships that mirror the same dynamics. We create these patterns because they are familiar, even if they don't serve us. The key to breaking these unseen patterns lies in self-awareness. The more we understand the emotional scripts that guide our behavior, the more we can begin to rewrite them. Breaking free from these patterns requires a willingness to face the discomfort of change, to acknowledge the patterns that no longer serve us, and to consciously choose new ways of relating to others. It is not an easy process. It requires patience, self-compassion, and a deep willingness to unlearn the emotional habits that have shaped our lives. But this is where healing begins. In the recognition of these patterns, in the understanding that they are not permanent, but learned, and that we have the power to change them. By becoming aware of these patterns, we take the first step toward creating relationships that are healthier, more secure, and more fulfilling. There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when the weight of our relational patterns becomes too much to bear. It's not a dramatic epiphany, but a soft realization, the kind that creeps in when we stop to look at our relationships from a distance. In that moment, we feel a deep discomfort, a longing to change, but also a quiet fear. The patterns we've repeated for so long have become so ingrained in our emotional lives that the idea of breaking free feels overwhelming. How do you begin to untangle years of learned behavior, years of emotional responses that have shaped the way you connect with others? The first step in breaking the cycle is awareness, recognizing the patterns for what they are. This awareness is not about self-blame, but about understanding that the way you've learned to love, to trust, to give and receive affection is deeply influenced by the emotional environment of your childhood. It's about understanding that you are not broken, but that you've been shaped by the experiences you've had, and that these experiences have created unconscious patterns of behavior that now affect how you relate to others. Recognizing the cycle is a moment of deep truth. You see how your attachment style, whether anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, has guided the choices you've made in relationships, and you begin to understand that these choices were never about the person in front of you, but about the emotional scripts you learned long ago. In this realization, there is power, because once you understand the pattern, you can begin to break it. You can begin to choose differently, to choose relationships that do not mirror the past, to choose a new path that leads to healthier, more secure connections. But breaking the cycle is not immediate, nor is it simple. It requires courage, the courage to face the discomfort of change, the courage to step into the unknown. The familiar patterns of emotional chaos, of seeking reassurance or pushing love away, are comfortable, even if they are painful. They are part of your emotional identity, and stepping away from them means facing the fear of the unknown. This fear is natural. When you've spent your life responding to emotional dynamics that feel familiar, even if they bring you pain, it's difficult to imagine love being any different. We often convince ourselves that love is supposed to be hard, that intimacy comes with struggle, that emotional chaos is a sign of depth. But the truth is that love doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be filled with anxiety or avoidance. Love can be steady. It can be calm. It can be secure. But this truth requires vulnerability, the willingness to face your deepest fears, to face the parts of yourself that have been hiding behind walls of self-protection. It means allowing yourself to trust again, even when trust feels risky. It means allowing yourself to be seen, fully, without the mask of emotional distance or anxiety. It means opening yourself to the possibility of love without the need for drama or emotional turbulence. This is where the healing begins. Healing is not about forgetting the past. It is about learning to respond to it differently. It is about rewiring the neural pathways in your brain that have formed around attachment, changing the way your body and mind respond to emotional stimuli. This rewiring happens gradually, through small, intentional steps. It happens when you begin to recognize the emotional triggers that send you into old patterns and choose a different response. It happens when you begin to trust that you are worthy of love, that intimacy does not have to come with fear or anxiety, that you can give and receive affection without the need to prove your worth. Self-compassion is a key part of this healing process. As you begin to break the cycle, you may feel frustration or sadness that the patterns took so long to recognize. But it's important to treat yourself with kindness, to acknowledge that these patterns were learned as a means of survival and that changing them will take time. Be patient with yourself as you navigate this journey. Recognizing the cycle is not about punishing yourself for repeating the same mistakes, but about recognizing that you have the power to choose something different moving forward, and as you choose differently, you will begin to see how your relationships begin to shift. You will find that love doesn't have to feel chaotic, that intimacy can be steady, that trust can be given freely without fear. As you break the cycle, you are not just changing the way you relate to others, you are changing the way you relate to yourself. You are learning to value your worth, to set healthy boundaries, and to embrace the love that is steady, secure, and true. Breaking the cycle is a slow and sometimes painful process, but it is also the path to freedom. It is the path to a new kind of love, one that is grounded in trust, mutual respect, and emotional safety. And as you begin to walk this path, you will find that love, true love, is not about the chaos of the past, but about the peace you create in the present. Healing is a journey. It is a quiet unfolding of the self, a process of unraveling the layers of pain, fear, and confusion that we have carried with us for so long. When it comes to healing the wounds of childhood attachment, it is not about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it, to acknowledge its presence, to honor its role in shaping who we are, and to finally set down the burdens it has imposed on us. As we begin this journey, the first step is to acknowledge the pain that we carry. It is easy to overlook the emotional wounds of childhood, especially when they have been hidden for so long. But healing begins when we are brave enough to face them, to look at the ways in which our early attachment experiences have shaped the way we respond to love, intimacy, and connection. We must stop pretending that the past hasn't shaped us. We must stop minimizing the pain of our early experiences in order to appear strong, or to avoid the discomfort of feeling vulnerable. For those with anxious attachment, healing begins with recognizing the need for constant reassurance and validation. It means acknowledging that this behavior is rooted in a deep-seated fear of abandonment, a fear that was learned in childhood when love may have felt unpredictable, inconsistent, or conditional. Healing for the anxious person means learning to soothe their own anxiety, to trust that they are worthy of love, even without the constant reassurance they crave. It means learning that love is not a commodity to be earned through anxiety, but a gift that flows freely when given in healthy, secure relationships. For those with avoidant attachment, healing begins with acknowledging the emotional distance that has kept them safe, but also isolated. It is the recognition that avoiding intimacy, pushing others away when they get too close, is a learned survival mechanism. Healing for the avoidant person means learning to let go of the belief that vulnerability is dangerous. It means learning that emotional closeness does not mean losing yourself, but that it can create the space for true connection. Healing for the avoidant person means learning to open up, slowly, gently, without fear of being consumed or overwhelmed. And for those with disorganized attachment, healing means making sense of the confusion and fear that characterize childhood relationships. It is about understanding that love was once both a source of comfort and terror, and learning to separate the two. Healing for the disorganized person means learning to trust that love can be stable, predictable, and safe. It means finding a way to stop the emotional push-pull, to stop running from intimacy, but also to stop clinging to it in desperation. Healing means finding a balance between connection and independence, between vulnerability and self-protection. No matter the attachment style, the core of healing is the same: self-compassion. It is the understanding that the pain you carry is not a reflection of your worth, but a product of the environment in which you were raised. Healing means learning to love yourself, to honor your own emotional needs, and to treat yourself with the same care and kindness you would offer to someone you love deeply. It means learning to set boundaries, to protect your emotional well-being, and to accept that you are worthy of secure, healthy relationships. One of the most powerful ways to heal attachment wounds is through therapy, a safe, compassionate space where we can explore the emotional scars of our past. Therapy allows us to process the pain, to recognize the patterns we've been repeating, and to learn healthier ways of relating to others. It offers the chance to rewrite the emotional script we've been following, to replace the old patterns of fear, anxiety, and avoidance with new patterns of trust, vulnerability, and intimacy. But healing is not only about processing pain, it is about creating new emotional experiences. It is about building relationships that reflect the kind of love we deserve, secure, steady, and reciprocal. As we heal, we begin to attract people who mirror the emotional stability we are cultivating within ourselves. We begin to create connections that are grounded in trust, empathy, and mutual respect. Self-awareness is a key part of healing. The more we understand the ways in which our childhood experiences shaped our adult behavior, the more we can consciously choose different ways of relating to others. Healing means noticing when we are falling into old patterns and gently redirecting ourselves back to healthier ways of interacting. It is about catching ourselves before we react from a place of fear or insecurity, and instead responding from a place of calm, clarity, and self-respect. Healing is not a destination. It is a journey. It is the journey of becoming whole again, of learning to love ourselves as we are, without the emotional scars of the past weighing us down. It is the journey of creating new ways of loving, new ways of trusting, and new ways of being in relationship with others. And though the path may be slow, it is one that leads to emotional freedom. Freedom from the patterns of the past, and the possibility of a future where love is steady, secure, and fulfilling. Healing from the wounds of the past is a delicate, ongoing process, and there is no single moment when the journey ends. It is not a straight path, but a winding road, one that requires patience, self-compassion, and a deep understanding of the layers of emotion we carry with us. As you move forward, you will encounter moments of clarity, moments of doubt, and moments of profound growth. But through it all, you will find that healing is not about achieving perfection. It is about becoming more fully yourself, more attuned to your true emotional needs, and more capable of building healthy, secure relationships. As you embark on this new path forward, it is important to remember that you are not defined by the attachment patterns of your past. You are not defined by the ways in which you once responded to love, to fear, to intimacy. You are defined by your capacity for growth, for self-awareness, for compassion. Your past may have shaped you, but it does not have to dictate your future. The path ahead is not one of erasure, but of transformation. It is the path of learning to embrace who you are with all of your complexities, your wounds, your strengths. The first step on this path is the awareness that your attachment patterns can change. Understanding that the emotional responses you once thought were unchangeable are, in fact, flexible, gives you the power to heal. By becoming aware of the ways in which your past experiences have shaped your relationships, you begin to recognize the unconscious choices you have been making in love and the emotional habits you have been repeating. Awareness is the key that unlocks the door to change. It is the light that illuminates the shadows of your attachment wounds and allows you to see them for what they are: temporary, learned responses that can be unlearned. The second step is self-compassion, the ability to treat yourself with the kindness and understanding that you often extend to others. Healing begins when you stop blaming yourself for the emotional scars of your past. It begins when you acknowledge that the attachment patterns you developed were not your fault, but rather a result of the emotional environment you grew up in. Self-compassion is about forgiving yourself for the times you fell into old patterns, for the moments when you allowed fear or insecurity to guide your actions. It is about giving yourself the grace to heal, and understanding that healing is a journey, not a destination. As you move forward, You will begin to notice small, subtle changes in the way you relate to others. You will start to recognize moments when you are no longer guided by the need for constant reassurance or the fear of emotional closeness. You will begin to notice when you are able to set healthy boundaries, to engage in intimacy without fear, and to trust yourself and others in a way you never thought possible. These changes will not happen overnight, but they will happen slowly, steadily, as you begin to rewrite the emotional scripts that have governed your relationships. The path to healing also involves building new relationships that are grounded in the emotional security you are creating for yourself. As you begin to heal, you will find that the people you attract into your life will reflect the emotional stability you are developing within yourself. You will start to form relationships where love is steady, respect is mutual, and trust is given freely, without the constant need for validation or fear of abandonment. These relationships will not be perfect, but they will be grounded in a sense of security that was once absent from your life. And through these relationships, you will learn how to love in new, healthier ways that are not based on fear or insecurity, but on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. Ultimately, the journey of healing is not about perfection, but about progress. It is about learning to live with the parts of yourself that have been shaped by the past and gradually transforming those parts into strengths. It is about recognizing the patterns that no longer serve you and choosing to move beyond them. It is about understanding that love does not have to be chaotic, that intimacy does not have to be fraught with fear, that connection does not have to be accompanied by anxiety. True love, healthy love, is steady. It is secure. It is grounded in trust and mutual respect. And as you move forward on your healing journey, you will find that this love that is kind, stable, and nurturing, is not only possible, but it is already within you, waiting to be embraced. The path to healing may be long, but with each step, you will find yourself closer to the love you have always wanted. The love that is steady, secure, and true. And as you heal, you will come to see that the greatest love of all is the love you give to yourself. The love that allows you to embrace your past, accept your present, and create a future where love is not just something you seek, but something you live.